And so by my mid 30s, um, I was doing well professionally and, making six figures and all of that.
Mhm.
But I was really depressed and I was really sad and I was just broken because, again, he was coming out of a marriage. We were in this relationship. He'd gotten married when he was like 19, and he was very clear that he was cheating. Phones were silent. Things just weren't right. But there's a thing that a lot of women have, especially if you've been successful. We are very stubborn, right? And we think that because we've been successful in other areas of our lives, that we can turn a bad personal relationship around. And that's what I tried to do. And I was like, nope, not giving up. Like I spent 2 years in this relationship, not giving up. Nope, it's been 4 years, not giving up. 7 years, nope, not giving. I have spent 7 years. I'm going to change this person. It's going to be
Wow,
good.
yeah.
And then 10 years later, it's like, oh, this is not getting any better.
Yeah.
And so I literally just I felt like I could not breathe. It was so bad. It was taking the emotional toll on me. On the outside, things look good, but on the inside, I was like I said, I was dying. Pivotal point for me because at this point I had my daughter. She was now an early teenager and a young teen, should I say. And she's seeing a lot of this back and forth. And I could see how the lack of stability in our home because I had this relationship. I could see how it was affecting her. I can see that she didn't have the same security that I had when I was growing up. She didn't have the confidence. And I was just setting a bad example overall. I definitely love this person, but it was so hard to let go. Um, but I had to finally choose for me and I had to choose for my daughter. And so I broke it off for the umpteenth time. But that last time was for good. And it was the best thing that I could have ever done. Because I eventually reconnected with my now husband. I broke up with, the long-term relationship at 40.
Mhm.
I think what happened was I was approaching 40 and I was like, at 30 something, 35, 36, 38, you're trying to beat the clock. You're trying to get married before 40 because 40 just seems so old. And that's what it was for me. I think I was just trying to hang in there. I was like, I can get a ring out of this. I did get a ring out of it, but then I lost it. But because
And
the
sometimes
relationship,
the
I just didn't.
ring's not really, you realize it's not actually really what you want. The ring
Yeah.
symbolizes something, right?
Yeah. It was a beautiful ring, but yeah, I didn't value it because of everything that had gone on. And I just placed it wherever and he used to complain about it. So eventually one day I just lost it. Beautiful ring. I don't know. Maybe he took it. I don't know.
Bummer.
um, so right.
Yeah, total bummer.
So I think when I reached 40, there was a couple things going on. There was the fact that my daughter was seeing this. I had to accept the fact, okay, I'm almost 40. I'm probably not going to have any more kids. I have seen all the statistics like everyone else has seen. Every woman sees at 35 and up how hard it can be, all of the challenges. I even accepted the fact that perhaps I was not going to get married, but I damn sure wasn't going to get married by 40 because I'm 40. And I think that was almost like it was like a sense of peace. Like, okay, well, I didn't beat the clock. It's not going to happen. So let's just reset. And that's what I did. I took some time off. And after I broke up with that person, I was kind of like in the middle of my day, just driving in a shopping plaza, and I'm driving, and this person, like this guy, like walks in front of my car, and I'm like slamming on the brakes. I'm like, this guy is about to get hit. And so I stopped the car and I looked at this person, and I'm like, Daryl. And Daryl was my now husband. I originally met like uh, 12, 13 years before that. We had dated before I finished law school, kind of like on and off casually. To be honest, in between some of my breakups with my ex, I would contact Daryl. Then I get back on my ex, so I'd stop talking to him. So this time it was kind of weird. It just kind of happened. Like I almost bumped into him, and we exchanged numbers again, and we started dating casually at that point. I was not in a rush to get into a relationship at that point. So I was dating other people, and I leveled up my dating because you can't date in your 40s the way that you dated in your 20s, and sometimes even in your 30s. So I had to be really conscious and intentional about who I was dating, who I was letting into my space,
Hmm.
evaluating whether they were worthy to be around me. And I definitely saw a difference in the quality of men. And so, but Daryl had always in the back of my mind, I always reconnect with him because I knew that he was husband material. I wasn't ready at first, but then he also wasn't saying the same things that made me think, oh, yeah, he's going to marry me. And he shouldn't have because we weren't even in a relationship. So, yeah, we were dating casually. About 8, 9 months later, I was kind of like, okay, we've known each other for a while. I'd
Hmm.
like for us to date exclusively. And it was so funny because I took him out for his birthday and they took him out to eat. We went to like a club, like with a live band, great dinner, got a hotel room, got a cake, everything. It was super, super nice. And so I asked him that night, if he wanted to date exclusively. In my head, I thought he was going to be like, oh, yeah, let's do it. And so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
asked him
That's
that, and
usually
he was
when you
like,
ask when you feel pretty confident, huh?
right, right. So I did. And he was like, oh, okay. And so I'm like laying there, I'm like, um, well, don't wait too long because, I might change my mind. He was like, oh, okay. And I was like, I'm a little impatient too, right? He was like, oh, okay. And that was it. Like he did not answer me. I was like, oh my gosh. Like I think I just totally got played. Like totally. And so at this point, him and I, we would date. We'd go out like during the week, like for lunch, sometimes like one day on the weekend. And so like 3 weeks later, like I didn't bring it back up again, and he didn't bring it back up, and I just refused to bring it back up, like the answer of us being together, because I know he heard what I said. And so we go out to lunch, and I'm like, you know what, this is gonna be the last time that we go out. Like I'm done with this. Like I'm tired of making arrangements, for my daughter, all that. So we're at lunch, and I'm just kind of like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. So at the end of the date, he was like, yeah, so I thought about what you asked and I decided I like for us to be together. And I'm like, okay. So now I have like, I'm like checking out because you have taken 3 weeks. Like, who takes 3 weeks to decide if they want to be with me or not?
Right.
And so it's just so interesting how like, we have these certain expectations of people. Just because we've made a decision does not mean, and we thought it out, does not mean that they have, analyzed the situation or they thought about it, or they're at the same place. It's funny now, but it was not funny then.
Yeah.
My confidence definitely took a blow, took a hit. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so embarrassing. But it took me a minute to, after he said yes, it took me a minute to even say like think about the fact that we're in a relationship now and how they even looks. So eventually we kind of got it together. So we're in this relationship, right? So one of the first conversations that we have in this relationship is, I asked if he wanted any children because he's like 46, 47 at this point. He didn't have any children. And he said, yeah, I'd like to have children. And so at this point, in my mind, anyone who was his age, anyone that I've dated this age, most men already had children. And if they didn't have children, it was because they couldn't have children if they wanted to. So I was thinking he was sterile. Anyway, I was like, well, I can have kids. Clearly, I have my daughter. I can have kids. I question you. But then at the same time, again, I was thinking about the fact, again, I am over 35. I don't know what's going on with my eggs. All these doctors can't be wrong. Right. And so, we had the conversation. I was like, look, I'm 40. I don't know what the possibility is. And so we decided that we wouldn't necessarily try to have a baby, but we wouldn't try to prevent it either. And so 6 months later, um, I hadn't gotten pregnant, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I really am barren. Like, I'm sterile. I've gotta be." Um, because I was thinking it was just gonna be so easy. It was so easy with my daughter. Granted, it's like 15 years later, but I just thought, well, maybe it would still happen. And so within that period, about 6 months later, I had that going on, thinking I was barren, but I also felt like I wasn't fully connecting to Daryl, to my husband, my now husband. And it wasn't until I had another like moment, like I did in my late 20s. I was like in the bathroom on a Sunday afternoon, and I just started like broke down and I just started crying. And I realized then that I had not fully processed my past relationship. And there was so much hurt and so much pain from that previous relationship that again, I didn't take time to mourn it. I was with the person for 10 years, and that's a long time. Whether we
Mhm.
got married or didn't, he
Yep.
was, a part of me. But when we broke up for the last time, I was just like, I'm done. It's over. I'm just gonna keep it moving. And I did not just take time just to emotionally process it. So at that moment in the bathroom, like I'm like breaking down, bawling, and I realized like all of this is just coming out. I couldn't stop. And so I'm a Christian, and I was like saying a prayer at the same time. I was like, and I don't even know where these words came from. I was just like, God, just help me just get over my past relationship, get that all out of me, and then help me to open my heart for my now husband, and show me how to be the wife that he needs me to be. Because I knew he was a good guy. He really was a good guy. Um, and then when I was done with that session, crying and bawling, I was just overcome with the greatest sense of peace that I have ever felt in my life. And I knew at that point, like, this is the person, Daryl was the person that I wanted to marry. When I tell you within 3 weeks, I was pregnant in 3 weeks. And that really, I truly believe, was because I was holding on to so much hurt and pain, and stress, that my body was not in a place where I could conceive. And your body knows when something's going on when you're not at peace. It doesn't matter how much mentally you try to get over it; it's still there. You can't get over that. You have to release that. And I didn't. But once I did, I was pregnant immediately. And then at that point, I was 40, and a couple months later, we were married and had our first son, later on that year. And then we had our second son 20 months later. So
Wow.
yeah, I got married at 41, had first son at 41, and my second son at 43. Both naturally conceived, healthy babies, busy babies. But
So
I went to the Dominican Republic a couple of days after that. I went with not with my husband, but I went with two cousins. And I remember for me it was different because that trip, um, I was just again, I was like at peace. I didn't have any alcohol the whole time, which was interesting. And I
yeah.
didn't want any. But I was just like, I felt so good, and I felt so good in the relationship that I had, back at home. And it couldn't, in a way, wait to get to him. Versus when I was with my ex, whenever I would go out of town, I go on a trip, I would kind of be looking like, oh, like maybe I'll meet someone on this trip who will be like the man of my dreams, and I could leave, this one. I really was thinking that. And then so the mindset was totally different when I went on this trip. Um, and then I got back and I was sick. I was sick because I had just traveled to another country and my body was not adjusting, did not adjust well. I was going through some traveler stuff. So I was sick. So it did not occur to me at all that I was pregnant. But I'm sure it just happened like right before I left and maybe right after I got back. So I do remember like that being different. Just like, yeah, this is the one. And I was totally at peace, totally cool, not looking for anyone else, even though like I was meeting men while I was in another country. I was just like, I'm so not interested. Just
Yeah.
so not interested.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you had all these dreams. You're a lawyer. You have all these amazing things that you've achieved that you were expecting in your 20s that you received in your 40s. I love that you have had, more than half of your children at plus 40. So let's talk about that. Like, I know that you started a podcast called Pregnancy After 40.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when I got pregnant with my son at 40, the first son, so obviously I was excited at first, but then the reality hit as well. Again, the statistics of things happening. Are you going to miscarriage? Are you going to have a healthy baby? Like all of that. So I was super, super nervous throughout my pregnancy. And my husband was like, well, you should write those things down. And so I would write like little blogs, little articles, that kind of thing. But I never shared it anywhere because I was just terrified that this may not go through. So uh, when my son was born, and he was fine, but when he was about a week old, I'll never forget. I was like sitting down on a chair on a sofa, and I was nursing him in one hand. I had my phone in the other, and I just started a pregnancy after 40 group because now I'm like, okay, like woosah, like everything is okay and it's okay. And I wanted to create a space for women to be encouraged and supported on this journey because we hear again so much of what can go wrong, but it can totally happen and it can be good. And so maybe a year later, I started a podcast because now I've got like a couple thousand members in this group. And I was like, why don't I just start taking some of these stories and sharing them with people? And so now the group itself has about 9,000 members. And, we have podcasts with just so many women just sharing their story, everyone who is 40 and up who have had babies. And just the different ways, whether it's naturally, whether it's with IVF, IUI, egg donors, sperm donors, like the whole game is surrogacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a place for women just to be encouraged. Look, it can happen. And it's not as scary as everyone makes it out to be. Are there miscarriages? Yes. But can you miscarry in your 20s? Yes, you
Mm-hmm.
can.
Yep.
And so, now every week in the group, there's an announcement of at least 8 to 12 women that have had babies during that week. And so it's consistent. And so there are women from all over the world, literally all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a safe place for them to come. So yeah, that's what it's all about.
I love that. Thank you so much for supporting that community because I think there is a lot. And, as someone who's in their late 30s, you definitely get, who also wants to have children, you definitely get those looks of, and people kind of giving you, when you say you want to have kids in your late 30s, early 40s, people giving you that look and unsolicited advice of, oh, it's harder,
Mhm.
like you've never heard it before. And you're like, oh,
Mhm.
thanks for that. Thanks for the reminder.
Right, right.
But it's so nice to hear that there are lots of women, and I'm in a lot of those groups as well. And I'm going to get into your group, and definitely I would like to hear these encouraging stories because it can happen, and it does happen a lot. And there's a lot of healthy women and couples who have babies naturally as well as assisted. And I think
Absolutely.
there seems to be some people that have like some aversion to assisted pregnancy. But yeah, and do you know why that might be? Have you heard any of that in your group, or do you have any opinion on that?
So I've talked to some women who have more of a visceral reaction to egg donors.
Yes.
And it's because they feel like genetically that's not their baby, even though they're carrying the baby. They feel like this baby doesn't have any of my DNA. What if the mother, the donor, has mental health issues? And so I've heard those conversations. But I did an interview with a woman, and she had an egg donor. And the egg donor was her niece. So
Wow.
at
Okay.
least there was some DNA, some shared DNA, and she had, a talk with her brother and the mom, be sure it was okay. And they gave her the blessing. And so her niece was the egg donor. She was 51 when she had her baby. And
Wow.
so, yeah, I just saw on Facebook that her daughter just turned like 5. And so it's
Wow. Amazing.
amazing,
That is
amazing. And
amazing.
so,
That is amazing. I follow a fertility doctor, and she posted on Instagram a while ago that it was the oldest frozen egg that they'd had. The egg was from before I was born, from like 80, 81 or eight.
wow,
Yeah, and they just had the baby now. So the egg was actually older than the mother of the baby.
wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Isn't
That's
that like,
amazing.
doesn't that just blow your mind?
Yeah,
I was like, oh my gosh, the possibilities now.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
So when I
interesting.
meet
Sorry, go ahead.
okay, so when I meet women like you, I'm like, in my mind, like, you have so much time. You have so much
Yeah.
time.
And it is really lovely to hear that, because I do hear, particularly from women, saying, look, you know, relax, there is time. But I mean, I guess the feeling of the biological clock ticking, and that there is that's certainly that pressure as well. For me, it's not so much the after 40 thing. It's how our bodies change after 40, and it's harder to lose weight, and it's more demanding, and sometimes you have back pain. So you're like, there's just all these other things to consider that, and then your body's going to change dramatically, and then it's got to bounce back, and you'll have a newborn when that's happening. So there's a lot of things. What happened with your career when you had your children?
So that's very interesting. At this point, I had been practicing law for over 10 years. And to be honest with you, I've been kind of doing the same thing for like a good 10. So I was kind of at the point, like I knew what I was doing. I was good with what I was doing, but I was also kind of bored.
Right.
And so, like, taking this on, the pregnancy after 40, that became like something that was very inspirational for me career wise. And we started in it a business, again with the podcast, monetizing things. And it's definitely part of my journey, but I even took it further. One of the things I didn't mention is when I was in my 20s, before I went to law school, during that 2-year period in which I was dating, and I felt like this dating scene is really bad. At that point, I actually started creating a dating agency, a dating service. Like I had done like brochures and a website and all of that. Because I was like, it's just gonna be tough. I was thinking it might be tough. But I put it to the back burner, I put it to the side because going to law school was always a priority. So I did that. So now fast forward, in my 40s, last year I actually launched a matchmaking service. And so I work with really or highly successful women who have focused on their careers for a good part of their lives, for their 20s and their 30s. And now
Mhm.
I talk to so many women who make 6, 7 figures, just like amazingly well, women. They're like perfect on paper, but they're and so I have like a natural database of people in
Oh
my
my god. I'm so sorry. You've just
circle
you've
because
you've just cut
I've
out a little
connected with
bit.
a lot of attorneys, judges.
So sorry.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. We may have to come. So if you can go back to, you had a database. That's where we cut out. Sorry about that. There seems to
Okay.
be some connection issue.
Okay. So yeah, so I have a good database in my natural network, my professional network of knowing like lawyers and judges and doctors and all of that. And so it makes it a really good fit for a lot of the women that I work with because I have people who are already on their level professionally. And now it's just a matter of getting them connected with someone who has similar values. And so I love doing that. I actually became certified in matchmaking, which I don't think I had done the last time, the time that we actually connected. But I've launched that. And so it's been amazing. And so for me, 40 was just a really defining moment. 40 is the age where kind of like we're too old to be young, too young to be old. And sometimes we have been
True.
doing things for a long time and we're not excited about it anymore.
Mm.
And so, my thing was rethinking and redesigning your life after 40, because so many things happened to me after 40. I got married, I had children, and started this new business and had been, through this journey. And when you become 40, I, firmly believe that everyone has a story. You may not be where you want to be, but you have a story that you can share. And I love that I'm able to connect with women because I meet so many women again who are, in their 40s and they have like they're perfect on paper, but they want a partner and they want children.
Mm.
And so I'm able to really connect with them, like, hey, just slow down for a minute and really teaching them how to date and date the right way. Stop being in a rush because it'll happen. Or sometimes in the process, you push people away because you want it to happen. You want it to happen now because you're like, my eggs are going to get old.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
realistic.
Yeah.
So,
Panic
um, I
partnering, it's a thing.
yeah, and so I love having those conversations, and I love that I can actually show, you know, I've gotten married over 40, I've had children over 40, and you can too. But listen, we're gonna have to rethink your approach to dating because if you've made it this far, there's some adjustments you probably need to make, and so I have a whole framework that I take women through um, to date different. And because I do work with so many professionals, executives, that kind of thing, I align it to business. Some of the same principles that you use in business, some of the principles that you use to make you successful in your career, profession, taking some of those same principles and applying them to dating and relationships. And if you're in a business, you understand systems and processes, so it's really aligned with that.
Mm.
And it makes perfect sense. And you're like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
It's just about really about being intentional because, you know, our love lives, our partners, they're such a serious part of our lives. And we're so intentional about going to school, going into college, making a lot of money, starting business, but we're not intentional about our love lives. We just let it happen randomly. And you can't do that anymore. If you don't want to continue wasting time and running on that hamster wheel, you've got to be intentional about it. And so that's what I share with women. And this is how you do it. These are steps. You can follow steps.
Just before we wrap up, I want to ask you, is there any last words of advice for any women over 40 or any people over 40 who are wanting like to get married and have a family and, start that journey?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, again, you can just use my story and just so many other people. That is definitely possible. And I always encourage people, like what I just said, just be intentional about what you want and focus on it. Right? It's not about being desperate. It's about being determined and focus on how to do it right. It's definitely possible. Get your body right now. There's certain things you should be doing to prepare your body so you're at optimal health if
Mm-hmm.
you do decide to have children, whether it's IVF or naturally. You want to be at a really healthy level. So, there's things you can be doing now to prepare for that. Focus on that and as opposed to just getting the man. Like focus on you and make sure that you're in the right place. Make sure that you have processed any hurt or pain that you've experienced in the past and learn how to really cope. Because at this age, you have 20 to 25 years more worth of stress, of bad eating, of alcohol, all of this. So you have to purge and cleanse emotionally, mentally, and physically. Totally possible, but it's just the right way to get there.
Thanks for listening to the Rebel Love Podcast, the podcast about love, sex, and relationships. If you like this episode, please support us by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform, and find all the details of this episode and more at rebellove.com/podcast.